Welcome to the show, Ty Shane. Once behind bars, now a marketing star. Ty's journey from imprisonment to AI marketing genius is as inspiring as it gets. He's here to drop some serious value bombs on AI and code email strategies, so get ready. Ty, the floor is yours. Tell us about your story.
Well, thank you, Danny. So, my story, like we all have our stories. Mine is just one of overcoming addiction, and addiction led to the battle of institutionalization. And so that's how do you overcome the conditionings of being incarcerated for extended amounts of time. And so that's been my life struggle. Former foster youth, adopted at the age of 6, birth mom was 13. And so my story is premised on her story. And I always make a point to emphasize that because that's probably the greatest tragedy of my story is her story and what she had to go through. And then the generational impact that happens from stories like hers. So it's an important element. Um, a lot of my passions from my story have to do with, injustices or inefficiencies in existing systems. And those inefficiencies create generational impact and not the good kind, the curses kind. And so that's my story summed up in its utmost, brief form. And so today, just being here, like gratitude just to be here on this podcast right now, like that's a real thing because there were moments in my life where I never accepted that I would have any form of a life like I have today. I don't even have much, and so it becomes just yeah. So it's a blessing in its own way, and so that's my story, summed up.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome story. Um, Do you want to go into the detail of how did you manage to change your life? Because it takes a lot of effort, and not everyone can do that, obviously, but you did. Do you want to share that?
Well, disclaimer: I didn't do it. All glory to God. And without community and everyone along the journey that has helped me, that has given me opportunities, even just the opportunities that I blundered away in a relapse, those all contributed to my rise. So even when I was quote unquote failing, I was learning. And so it's just like in business, there's no failing, there's only learning and winning. It's kind of like that in life too. So my story is literally the accumulation of many people and God, first and foremost. And so my journey really started to change when I met my birth mom. And so I met her right before I turned 29 years old. And that's after having done over 7 years incarcerated in federal prison, state prison, many county jails, all related to addiction. When I was in my addiction, it was stealing. So I would steal things. I would steal from stores. I would steal cars. I'd break into houses. And the reason that I'm so like transparent with that is because there are a lot of people out there who may even watch this who have a loved one who does the same dumb stuff. And so there's hope. There's tons of it. There's a lot of hope.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
and so meeting my birth mom is what changed it because my greatest anchor was abandonment. And so like even right here I have forsaken. Like that literally is a like an identifying word for how I felt inside. And then like right here, my last tattoo is blessed. And so it's actually kind of symbolic that that's my last tattoo I got because I am blessed. And I think in hindsight too, you can really see how blessed you are, but not in the moment, a little bit harder to see. And so when I met my birth mom, every loose end that I had from abandonment to the newfound compassion that I had for women in addiction, it all synergistically came together. And so when I met her, I had already been around women who had battled addiction and I had seen how they were with their children. And so I already had a level of empathy for them because I've seen how powerful the drugs were. And so when you hear their stories as well, there's trauma, sexual abuse, all sorts of things. There's a story. There's a story. And the system doesn't care about the story. that's kind of, where the narrative needs to change, because there's whys. And so when I met her, I understood more than I could have had I not gone through addiction. And then I also saw that being taken away from her was God's greatest act of mercy in my life. And that's nothing against her. It's just that she's the victim. And so victims tend to create victims. And that's exactly what was happening with me. And so when I was taken away at 4, she had another kid under the same, cycle of dysfunctional abuse that died. And that's what the DCFS already had a case opening against her and on me. And so being taken away and now projecting forward, she lost all of her other children too. And when I say that, I don't say that in a negative way. I say that in what is a 13-year-old who's abandoned by her mom, forced to raise a kid, and then repeat cycles of abuse just in order to survive, because that's all she knew. So from 8 to 13, all she knew was abuse. And then she got abandoned at 13 with a kid. Like, what is she going to do? So the anger, the resentment, everything that I had was so illogically placed. Children cannot analyze their environments. They do not have the ability. Their brains are not developed. And so everything that I had held inside was so illogically based, illogically misplaced that, it's just crazy, the hidden anchors that we can carry from experiences of children. And the thing is what we compute as a child is probably always going to be wrong. So I didn't realize all that. And the system was never going to reunite me with her. The system wasn't giving me drug treatment. The system wasn't giving me counseling. The system wasn't giving me any of that. And so when I got out of prison and I ended up meeting her, like that's when my journey with God began, because the intricate path that I had to take in order to be healed, even just how I got out to meet her. Like when I traveled, when I drove across the country, I had no car insurance. I had no license. It was suspended. I had $13 to my name. And I was literally coming off of drugs. So it's just the craziest story ever. And so I just hopped Walmart to Walmart to Walmart, and I did these little crowdsourcing app jobs. And it's an app called Observe Now. And so what I would do is I would go to these Walmarts and I would take pictures of Monster energy drinks. And it was an audit, because there's this thing between like manufacturers and retail. And so they have contracts, and if they are not doing X, Y, and Z, then they're not like holding their they're not meeting their agreement. So I guess there's certain places and certain like logos they have to have in certain places in the stores for Monster to be there in the way that they are. And so I just go take the pictures of the little mini fridges up at the checkout aisle, and I just make sure they had all the decals, and make sure that there were Monster energy drinks in them. And I make $8 to $13 or $8 to $14 per Walmart. And I just hop Walmart. I just hop across country doing that. And that's how I got there. But at the
Oh,
same time, too, it's like you hit that fork in the road, and literally, I had two choices. My car had already been repoed once. My phone just got shut off. My car is about to get repoed the second time. And so in that moment, it's like, your history, your pattern. And at that point, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to prison. I know that once I lose my car, deep in addiction, with my phone shut off, that leaves me no other choice than just to do dumb stuff. So I up and left, like literally spontaneously. And I had just reunited with her digitally like 8 months ago. And so like it's just interesting everything that happened. And then when I did reach out to her, I originally reached out to her in 2015, right before I got my last 3.5 year sentence. But she didn't get the message until after I got out. And it was like December of 2018 or January of 2018 of 2019. Um, she got the message and then she responded to it. And then that's when we reunited. And so I remember that day too, because my dad had to go take me bowling, because like I was just like, it's just emotional. It's an emotional time. I had looked her up when I was 13 too, and she was incarcerated at the time in prison. And so like, it was just how that all worked out. Just blows my mind away. But meeting her was literally it was the cornerstone in my recovery because I don't even know really how to word this, but it's like a synergistic blend of compassion and then that closure. And so nothing in my life was ever going to give me that thing that I needed. And so basically, after I met my birth mom, 6 months later is my sobriety date. And that was when I was at that time, I ended up relapsing on crack. And so I was in a homeless shelter. This is when I got into the Ohio State University. But like all that story started with meeting her. And even though the thing about recovery is like people think it's like this linear path and that like if you relapse or if you do this and like you can't get sober or you're not sober, it's like with anything. If you have an anger problem, you're gonna respond with anger. You're not just gonna cut it off cold turkey. But it's how you respond to the way you respond that impacts your trajectory. And so after meeting her, even though I had those hiccups, because I ended up relapsing like a month after I met her, and I relapsed like 2 months, and then I was clean for 3 months, and then I relapsed for another 2 months, and then I was clean. I've been clean now over 3 years. And so it's just it's this I don't even know how to say it. It's not just a linear journey. And so that's the backstory on that, and that's the most pivotal experience in my life for my transformation. And in another way too, because that's where I started to see God, and that's where I started to feel God. And so at the moment I was blind, and I'm just moving and it's crazy. But then as I start to get that clarity of vision and understanding, clarity of mind, and then you just start to connect different dots, and you're just like, oh my goodness, this just happened. How did this happen? And you start trying to break it down, and then it all just adds up. And then boom, I met someone. I call him like my spiritual mentor almost, and that was crazy how that even happened. And so like, it's just it's just this really like amazing blend of healing that happened. And so like what I would say for healing too, it's not like you just heal overnight. It's like there's this little seed that gets planted in you, and you have the opportunity to water it and to cultivate it at your own speed. And so I can say that there's definitely different speeds in that as well. But God, meeting my birth mom, those are the key pieces of my recovery.
That's one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. So thanks for sharing that, and I can imagine how much emotions you go through even telling that story. So
Well, it's
that's our
excitement now. It's excitement now. Like you're just telling it, I get pumped up because I'm just like, man, if people just knew, if addicts just knew, if the loved ones of addicts just knew what is really there waiting for them, it's like your hope meter just like your hope and your faith meter and everything just shoots through the roof. And so it used to be more emotional, like in like a more like down way, but now it's like, man, like there is hope. There's a lot of hope.
yeah, that's just awesome. Do you think that, um, in your view, that God gives us opportunities to change our lives, to do something, and we have to use them, or he just gives them to us, and how does that process work in your opinion?
From my experience, God's always giving you opportunity. God is always providing a way out. Even when I was in my addiction, God was giving me ways out because once you dig in, you got to dig yourself out. And I have very specific moments where if I had not had some unseen force pushing me still to deceitful habits, I could have frozen at night. I could have died. Not even joking. So God is in your lows and in your highs. And when you dig yourself into a hole, God is there to help dig you out. And it doesn't always look like glamour and shine and glittery like people want to always make God, seem like. He's there even in your darkest moments because there was a force that was pushing me and I fought against it. There's a couple relapses where I pushed so hard against this force that was trying to push me out. In the moment I couldn't see it. Now I can go in hindsight and I can see it. And so it's just like even when I first got out of prison, I was sober for like 6 months. And I had such a good opportunity. I was working with a guy in real estate who owned 139 houses. He was taking under his belt, help me buy my first house. Like I was literally like 60 days from getting my first house, just 6 months out of prison. I ended up relapsing and losing it all. Went and dated a stripper in Wendover. Don't do it. 10 out of 10 recommend. Do not do that. It's a really bad idea. Poor, bless their souls. Definitely suffering souls on those stages. And so, yeah, God is always there. God is always there, and it's crazy because you can take it biblical, and like God really is always there. And I love that question because you just took me back. Oh, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, that's awesome, man. And you mentioned that you found God uh, maybe after you left the prison, but before that, you weren't religious, or you were but didn't really listen to God. How was that?
So I was somewhat, I would say, spiritual to a degree. However, I was adopted by a LDS family, and I mean, my experience, I just say the most utmost loving care because they did the best that they could. They did all they knew, and they were not equipped to take care of me. They were not equipped to raise me. They were not properly informed how statistically difficult adopting a 6-year-old was going to be. 6-year-old is like six and above, the worst statistical age for adoption. And so they did the best they could. However, their I challenged their religious foundation. I refused to go to church. I was smoking weed. I was drinking alcohol. They literally had to sit me down, and they couldn't punish me. Like, you locked me out on of the computer. Well, I learned, hey, I can go get another hard drive, install Linux on it, and you can't keep me off the computer. Oh, you locked me out. Okay, well, I'm going to keep the window unlocked. I'm going to climb out on this side of the house, go all the way around the house, and climb into the office window. Oh, what? I can swipe the card to unlock a door. So, like, it didn't matter what they did. They couldn't stop me. And so, um, I mean, that's my best way to really describe that. Is I was a handful. And so, like, I was punished with religious punishments at times. So, like, one summer I had to read the Book of Mormon, and until I read it, I was grounded. That's probably like the worst thing you do. You never associate something like that with a consequence, and so that pushed me away really fast. So
Yeah,
that was part of pushing me away. They didn't realize what they were doing. They're just doing the best. It's all they knew. My sisters are angels. I'm the only adopted one, and boy, was I a handful. So they didn't know what to do. So those experiences, yeah, those experiences right there definitely kind of shaped that. And it wasn't so much that I was against God. It was my parents I associated with God, and then God I associated with organized religion, which is why I'm really big now on not organized religion, because God and organized religion are two different things. You don't need the organized religion to have God. God is always with us, as my story proves. I wasn't a part of the
yeah,
religion. God was with me. I wasn't going to the temple. I wasn't doing this. And God was right there with me in my darkest moments. And I just didn't see it.
definitely, definitely. So from what I understand, you're not part of LDS church or any church. You're just you found the God, found God. Um, you kind of have your own way communicating with Him, right?
Yeah, and so like when I was in Arizona, there was a church that I would go to, and I've gone to many different churches. So here's another thing: like I've gone everything from Christian Science, Evangelist, Baptist, Catholic, Scientology. Like I went and looked into everything. I've seen women preach, I've seen men preach, I've seen ritualistic, I've seen like Christian Science. Their whole religion is built on prayer. That's literally the cornerstone of their entire, like, it's all the same stuff, just presented differently. And all they do is they take their priorities and they just switch them around. That's all. It's all the same stuff. It's just switched around. Like I say, Christian Science is like prayer. And you get people who will go up there and they'll be like, prayer changed my life. I met the dude I needed to meet in an elevator. And like you hear all these amazing stories about how prayer changed their life. When you go anywhere, you'll hear it. It's just not necessarily, the number one component of the religion. And so it's just interesting to see how all the different religions function in that manner. And so, yeah, a little bit of background on that. I did searching. And so I've decided that I'm not, how do I say it? They're all the same, but different. So it's like, um, I'll like a non-denominational congregation where I can go to church and listen to a sermon. And since I'm in marketing and I study sociology, it's really fun to reverse engineer and dissect pastors. Like they are just amazing, amazing. They are so amazing, geniuses, geniuses. So that's been like I can worship anywhere almost, if that makes sense, because at the end of the day, that shell isn't has nothing to do with me and God. That's a completely different relationship.
Yeah, yeah, completely makes sense. Yeah, man, that's a very cool story. You wouldn't hear anything like that from most of the people. So, congrats on your journey. That was amazing. And I'm very curious about where you're now, about your company, what you're building, your marketing agency. Tell me about that.
So my marketing agency is cold email, and so that's mass outreach. That's getting in front of decision makers at scale via email. And so obviously there's, how do I say it, multi-channel approaches that you can couple with it. However, it's just the foundation block of it is email. It's withstood the test of time. Decision makers still use it. There's a lot of different communication methods that have fallen to the wayside over time, different platforms that have fallen to the wayside, but email has remained, and it continues to be a driving force for growth for companies all over the place. And so I like it because it's a little bit of like I shouldn't be doing this because I know all the tricks to get in inboxes at scale and not get pushed into spam. So it's like that I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, but it's not illegal. And so, yeah, it's not the most exciting thing, but it's crazy. It's crazy who you can get in contact with via email. It's absolutely nuts what can happen from an email.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man. And how did you even get into this industry? Why did you learn it? Um, why marketing specifically? Why email? How did that journey go?
Well, it's funny. This all circles back. It started with Grant Cardone. Started with Grant Cardone. So, yeah. So in about July of 2022, so I'm in college at the time. My first year in college was the Ohio State University. I was a molecular genetics major, but then I realized my fallacy. I'm like, wait, I don't want to be the scientist. That's a fool's errand with what I'm trying to do. I want to be the investor or the founder. And because here's another part, I'm taking pre-calc. I didn't even really do high school. I'm like, this is hard. It's just way too hard. You don't make enough money to have to learn all this. And so I switched. So I moved from Ohio to Utah. I switched majors. I went to sociology because I'm like, okay, I want to learn how to influence people. I want to understand how people work. I want to understand how the macro and the micro function differently. And so that was my second year in college. And so what I ended up doing at University of Utah, I would say it was right after my first semester at University of Utah. I came across Grant Cardone's. He was talking about sales and marketing and how marketing is the lifeblood of business. And then I ended up buying his 10x marketing course, and that's what triggered everything. And that's when I got my passport that I now have used to move to Mexico for the time being while I'm digital nomading. So it was right after that, so a year and a half ago, I went and got my passport that I finally got to use. And so the whole thing was we know the economy's going to crap. We know that COVID destroyed the dollar. So we know that yeah, there's just, I don't want to get into all that, but there are signals. And so I went into marketing and I got this. And my whole thing was based on what he said is like when the economy goes to crap, people need marketing more than ever. It's actually more important. And smart fish and the big fish are actually going to increase their marketing in those kinds of markets because while everyone else is pulling back, they're pushing out more. and because there's more fish for them now that everyone's pulling back out of fear. And so that's what started all that. And I ended up doing a Google on Coursera. I went and did their Google and e-commerce. It was a Google Ads and e-commerce course. And so, and I just started learning, taking different courses, trying different things. I mean, that journey, I hit everything from SEO to funnels to websites. I mean, I just started hitting everything, and that was one of my first, you know, mistakes. Was you got to pick one thing and just pile drive into it. But in hindsight, it worked out because now I have a holistic understanding of marketing that I never would have had I not tried all these different things, failed at a lot of different things. But it's like, I guess I could say is, as a delegator or a future delegator, understanding just enough is important. You don't need to know it all. You don't need to be the expert. You need to know how this functions with this works with this, or these all come together and build something even stronger. But if you're missing this, then it's not going to be as strong. So understanding the flywheel of marketing is what that journey of failure taught me. And so I ended up, now a year and a half later, about 6 months ago, I was a friend, dear friend, helped me by letting me use an extra car they had. And so to return the favor, I ended up doing cold emails for him, and I'd never done it before. And so come to find out, got really good results, amazing results. And I was like, wow, this is intoxicating. This is really me. And I didn't even plan on doing this. And so I started diving more into it. I mean, I got more opportunities after that. People would come to me at times. Like, I got an opportunity from another dear friend to help with his e-commerce event, and that really kickstarted it. And so this is where I say, like, God and community, because God works through people, and if iron sharpens iron, that means, like, number one, isolation is bad for you, but number two, like, that's how God works. And so that basically sealed the deal, and I'm like, okay, I need to really pile drive into this. And I realized my fallacy. You've got to stick with one thing. You got to become known for one thing. You can't keep bouncing around and doing all these things while you're trying to build a business. You can add on later. And so that's kind of where the whole cold email path started. So I've done it for like 6 months, 6.5 months. I've had like, maybe like 9 clients, 10 clients that prepped me to where I'm at now. And so now I'm at the stage where, like I talked before, where it's like, okay, you start bringing pieces in, you understand how everything's work because you've done it enough. But now you can bring in people who are, 2 or 3 times better than you, and you can start to learn how to delegate versus execute on everything. And so that's the thing. And it's funny because I'm doing a rebrand right now. I'm not going to necessarily mention it, but I have future aspirations of a partnership. And so I'm going to be branding around that. And definitely my brand's going to reflect that aspiration. Because at the end of the day, I'm in business for politics. I'm in the business for impact. And the best way to get that connection and to build those relationships is through business. So at the end of the day, if I can help you make money, you don't care that 9 years ago I got in trouble with the law. You don't care that, I got out of prison 5.5, 6 years ago. You don't care that, 4 years ago I was hooked on drugs. You don't care about any of that. And so it's almost like a hack for Justice Impacted to build relationships and to build relationships that you wouldn't otherwise be able to build. And so that's why I'm so adamant too about Justice Impact and starting a business, because it's crazy what God will do for you. Crazy the opportunities. Like I said before, like I wasn't even expecting cold email to be my thing, but I love it. And so yeah, that's my story. But trust me, it all circles back around. It's kind of funny. It's gonna be crazy. I got big 2025 aspirations.
Awesome. Yeah, it definitely does circle back. Um, yeah, and I'm gonna put the links to your profile or website in the description so listeners could also potentially work with you. I think it might be amazing for both you and them. Um, Before we end, let's say let's use this as an opportunity to share anything you want with the audience, maybe your biggest learnings or something that you want to share. or maybe people in position that where you were, let's say 5, 10 years ago, maybe you would say something to them or to your self if you was there.
So I'm gonna say I'm gonna go two, one to myself and one to other people. So I finally just started writing my book, and as I wrote my first chapter, like my life lesson is it in it is like you only know 1% of someone's life and of someone's story. So all of our biases and our judgments are based on such insignificant amounts of data that literally anything. So the human tendency is to fill in. So if I give you 10%, I already know human nature's going to fill in that other 90%. And so we continuously do that. And in the process of that, we end up oppressing and persecuting or suppressing different populations and different people with these stigmatizations. Some of the best people I have ever met in my life, still to this day, are in prison right now. I know someone who's doing life in prison, amazing heart, would give you the shirt off his back. He was young, he was dumb, and he was misled. And it was by his father. And that was the only reason he did what he did, because his father misled him and brought him into a drug lifestyle. And so you don't understand other people's stories. And I think it's important that we start to change that narrative for people who aren't in it to actually understand that people have a story. It's just like my birth mom. You know what I mean? So when she's locked up and she's getting incarcerated in her 20s and 30s, like, did anyone stop to ask what happened? And then in that process, seek to heal them, to give solutions? No, they don't do that because it's a business and it's not in the business of going out of business. Over half of the prison population is addicts. They can't have addicts get better. That's 50% of the population. That's literally not in their game plan. 77% of people that get out will return within 5 years. And that's very strategically done. And I can put it on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. My sociology education comes really good into this. So I'm like, man, if I had not been educated, I would not be able to look back and dissect all my experiences like the way I can now. And so that's to people who don't have the same life experiences, but have an open mind and a big heart. And then to my younger me, I would just say pray. Start praying. Even if you don't know what you're praying for, start praying. And I think that's probably the best advice that I could give is just start praying.
That's amazing, man. This is one of the best stories I've heard. I wish you all of luck, all of success that is in the future for you. It was an amazing conversation. All the links to Tai Shane's contacts, website is in the description. I'm glad to have you here, and I was glad to connect with you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Danny, for real. Thank you. This is awesome.
Thank you, man.